Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover. And today we're going to talk about something a little bit different than what we normally do, which is not unusual these days. I was thinking about kids. Now, I do not have kids. And how to tell them about hard things, how to talk to them about difficult conversations. And I was hearkening back to something that happened in my childhood when my grandmother passed away. I was only 8, but she was my most favorite person in the world. And she had been in the hospital for a long stint and then passed away. And I begged my parents to let me go to the funeral, just to go to the viewing, the showing, that, that creepy moment where you stare at a dead person in a casket. And I really wanted to go say goodbye to my grandmother, and they wouldn't let me. You're not old enough. This is, blah, 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 blah. And I remember even as a kid thinking, I don't know, if I'm old enough to say I'd like to go, why would you not give me that? Why would you not let me say goodbye to my grandmother? And I have thought about that through the years. And I know you have kids. I don't have kids. So, how do we talk to younger people about some of these hard things? And where is that line of letting them have that experience and protecting them from things that are difficult? So that might be interesting today.
Yeah, it's interesting. And because too, I think, again, I don't know. I'm getting old and grumpy. I don't know what you want to call it, right? But kids these days, kind of thing. That I remember in, my life, my dad's life, my grandfather's life, right? And then I look at my kids and I look at kids now, and I don't know if it's, is it a chicken or egg thing to where it seems like even, I say kids, that are in their late 20s or 30s are just nearly not as mature as what I was at that point. I mean, and I don't know if it's because of kind of helicopter parenting and protecting kids or what it is, but I agree with you. Again, as far as if you're 8 years old, we can kind of talk about some of the inflection points, for kids as far as my opinion, right? Because again, all I can give is my opinion. Some doctor, therapist is going to disagree with me. I don't care, right? This is my opinion.
Right.
It's what I've seen in my own life. And what's funny is if I roll back to my grandfather, right? My grandfather was born in 1909. Okay. So I had older parents, right? So my grandparents were a lot of times were the same age as great grandparents for people that I grew up with. But back at that point in time, it was just a different life, right? I mean, my grandfather at 9 years old, 4th grade, he quit school and he had to get a job.
Wow.
And he started helping to provide for the family when he was 9 years old. Okay. Going out, working on the farm, doing what he needed to do. Right. And again, we might look at that and think, oh my gosh, that's like child labor. You can't do that. Blah, 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 blah. Right. Okay. Well, I guess when I started to go to work, when I was 8.
Wow.
Okay. So it's just interesting, again, where we have kind of come to in thinking that for some reason kids aren't old enough or mature enough to handle certain things. And there is, just from a developmental standpoint, there is a point, and it's different for each kid, but somewhere between 6 and 8. They kind of start coming into their own self. They're self-aware at that point.
Yep.
And that's why you were, look, I'm old enough. I want to go. Why can't I go? Right. Because you were self-aware at that point.
Yeah.
And I think, for parents, a lot of times, we have legal responsibilities for our kids until they turn 18. Right. That's just what the government tells us, legal responsibility. And when they're very little and they can't make decisions like that on their own, from 0 until 6 or 8, parents do have to kind of make the decisions. But my opinion is, once they kind of get to that age, you need to start letting them have the autonomy, because I think if you don't, you end up kind of of crippling them and causing more of these traumas that in later life they have to work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, it wasn't like I wanted to go to the funeral. I didn't need to spend a lot of time there. I just wanted to see my grandmother one last time. And, had I walked in and was horrified or started screaming, I don't know what my reaction would have been at 8. I was a pretty damn mature 8-year-old. But, even if it was 5 minutes and then they took me out, but there was this idea of protecting me from things. And I know when my mom was sick, and I can think back to that, and there's an interesting twist that I'll tell you in a second. But when my mom got sick when I was about 11 or 12, and she passed away when I was 18, and to look at her and to see what she was going through, some part of me should have gone, man, that woman's not pulling through. I mean, she looked like she was on death's door.
Something's not right with mom, right? Yeah.
She had gone from probably 170 pounds down to 100, and she was going through chemo and radiation, and all her hair fell. I mean, it was bad. It was a bad scene. I look back at photos and go, how did I not know she was dying? Right. But I didn't know dying at that point. Now, as a, health practitioner, I can look at that and go, oh, yeah, that's not looking good. But I did not know. No one ever sat me down and said, your mother's dying. No one told me that. So when I found out in a stupid argument with my dad, I was floored. I mean, it was the worst possible way to find out. I didn't fold the laundry or something, and he's like, your mother's lying in a hospital bed dying, and you can't even fold laundry. And I suddenly went, I'm sorry, wait, what now? Can we back up on that?
Did I get that right?
Did I hear that properly? No one ever sat me down, and I was 18 at this point, 17, 18. They wanted to protect me from that. And it's like, sometimes that really backfires because the way I found out was not good,
Yeah.
And what I'm saying, the twist of that is I had a massage client for a while. She came to me terminal. And when she was dropped off and I saw her kind of lumbering down the parking lot to get to my office, she looked just like my mom near the end. And it was so triggering for me because now here I am, an adult, but thinking like the kid looking at this woman who was dying, and I saw her for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it got to the point where she couldn't find a ride and she definitely couldn't drive. So I would literally drive to her house, pick her up, drive her to my office, do Reiki and massage and stuff on her, then drive her back to her house. I never charged her. Sometimes she handed me $20, sometimes she gave me orange juice, sometimes like she couldn't pay me. But to me, that was my way of like almost giving back to my mom. And at one point this woman said, I'm dying. And I said, yeah, I know. She goes, I don't want you to tell my daughter. And I said, it's not my place to tell your daughter that. And she goes, no. When I die, I don't want you to tell my daughter. And I went, okay, hang on, what? So this woman trying to protect her daughter so she didn't miss college, but it was just so fascinating because I got to watch kind of what unfolded with my family now as an adult, watching this unfold with somebody else's family. And it was so fascinating. And I remember saying to a friend, man, I don't know if I could treat this woman. It is so triggering about my mom. And they looked at me and said, you have to, for your healing and hers. And I was like, absolutely. But it's like she wanted to hide from her college age daughter that she died because she didn't want to interrupt her semester. And I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I could do that. I mean, HIPAA aside, there's no way.
You can't come home for the funeral, honey. You got to stay in college.
That's what she wanted to do. And it ended up, that's not how it all unfolded. But it's like, at what point do you just have to, pull the trigger, but at some point sit down with your kid and break. Shit happens. There's bad things in the world. Everyone's going to die. And at what point do you have that conversation?
Yeah, well, and I think it's not just even with kids, because as we're sitting there thinking and talking, it's with adults too, right? I mean, how long do we try to protect other people or think that we're protecting other people? And again, obviously, the kids is an easy one to kind of see, but how much of the time are we kind of holding off the inevitable, and we're actually making things worse, right?
Yep.
Because again, you can choose to control the narrative, or the narrative will control you, right?
100%.
I mean, because your parents didn't tell you. Well, it came out in a way that your dad wasn't expecting, because he just happened to be, annoyed with you at the time.
Imagine my surprise.
Welcome to my life, right?
Right, yeah.
But it's because of that, you move from a place of proactivity into reactivity,
Yeah.
at that point when you choose to maybe let things go longer than they need to, especially when most people already kind of know what's going on anyway, especially people that are close to you. They already know or sense something is going on.
Right.
So why not tell them sooner? I mean, I'm the same way. I'm a pretty private person. I don't, I wait to tell people certain things, where some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I just met this new person." Oh,
Hmm.
it's like, when did you meet him? Yesterday was our first date, and what? I'm in
Good
love.
luck.
We're gonna get married, and I'm not that kind of person. But as we're talking, even this last weekend, there were some things that kind of came out. I met some friends that I hadn't seen in a while,
Mm.
and they all kind of knew some things that were going on in my life, even though I hadn't shared with anybody. And somebody kind of blurted out at one point something, and thinking it was common knowledge, that wasn't. Right. And it's like, how did you even know? I didn't tell you either. Right. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But where is that? But I think too, because you talked about your grandmother, and one of my grandfathers passed away when I was, oh, I must have been about six,
Mm.
something like that, because it was 6 or 7. Well, 70. Anyway, I can't remember if it was 77 or 79. Anyway, 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Right. And they obviously they didn't hide it from me, but I'd only met him a couple times because he lived in Alaska,
Mm.
and but we went to the funeral, and I remember they were doing a viewing, and I didn't want to go up, right?
Mm.
And luckily, again, I mean, my parents didn't force me to do it, right? I was
Right.
aware enough that for whatever reason I felt like I didn't want to do that,
Right.
and they didn't force me to do it,
Right. Which
right?
is the other end of my
the
thing,
other
which
the
is
other side
not
of it,
forcing you to go do something like that. That's, yeah.
yeah. And and I think it's, whether it's kids or other people, I think sometimes when someone is autonomous, and I just use that term loosely, right? So again, we would say, well, all adults are, right? All adults are capable of making a decision.
Mhm.
But even going down to, like I said, that somewhere between 6 and 8, I think most kids become autonomous at that point, and they want to be able to make their own decisions,
Yep.
right? It's like that's around the time when kids don't want to be dressed anymore. They want to pick their own clothes,
Yep.
right? And so when those sorts of things happen, and you see that, give people more autonomy, let them make the choice, right?
Yep.
And again, it's even with adults. If we withhold, if we don't say something, if we don't share something that needs to be shared, we're taking away their right, obligation, whatever you want to call it, of making a decision and choosing how they want to, react to it.
Yep. Well,
And we think we're doing them a favor, but we're not, because we're taking away kind of their free will and the choice that they have.
yep. Well, and to that point, when you were talking before about like adults hiding things, one of the greatest lessons that I learned during my year of singleness between my ex-husband and my soon to be current husband, um, was rejecting people. Because I grew up with my dad's, one of his favorite phrases was, "I don't want to be the bad guy. I'm always the bad guy. Don't make me the bad guy." So I grew up believing that breaking bad news or saying you don't want to see anybody anymore, or, I was probably, there was no ghosting back then, but that probably would have been my MO for a while, because I didn't have like, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I didn't want to make anybody mad. I didn't want to, I had that thing going. And when I was doing the dating thing, I had to do that a lot, because I thought dating was going to be a blast. Like all my friends were like, "That's horrible." And I'm like, but why would I not want to like meet people? I went into it with this attitude of not necessarily meeting a partner, but I mean, that would have been great. But it was like, but meeting like just cool people and like going out and having fun. And every single one of them I think only 2 made it to a second date, and that was it. So I did a lot of the texting of, wow, I really had a nice time. Thank you so much for coming out. I don't see it as being a match. And you're amazing. So good luck. I hope you find someone. And I got so good at phrasing that in a way that was direct. But it's like, I'm not stringing these people on. I knew after 15 minutes if I wanted to see them again. And I have so many friends who are like, oh, I'm so bad at that. And I just kind of ignore them and I feel bad about it. And it's like, no, 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 no. And that's not fair to this person if they're sitting around waiting for me. And that's also sort of the rudest way to do it, is that ghosting thing. So that experience of those, that online dating thing taught me to be more direct, and to, if it's not going to work, tell people that, don't string them on. And I see clients of mine doing that now, where they're, in a relationship that's not working and they're trying to fix it, but it's like, it's clearly just not the right relationship for them, and they want to give it they'll go to their grave trying to make it work. And it's like, at what point do you cut bait and you're just done? Which is a whole nother conversation we can have at some other point. But it's like,
Yeah.
the whole ghosting thing of not having the guts to actually tell somebody that this isn't working, thank you so much, or they want to quit their job and they're afraid, or they, whatever it is. But yeah, it's about being honesty and giving that other person the autonomy. And that's one of my values. When we did our values exercise, autonomy is one of them, to have that full information.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll tell you, I haven't done a great job of this my whole life. I mean, the two marriages, two divorces, I knew a long time beforehand that it wasn't right for me, but I continued to try to protect, kids, protect, the partner, instead of actually, just being open and honest earlier on.
Yeah.
And eventually things come out anyway, and like I said, I mean, I've seen this in my life, not just with the marriages, but in other things too, where, when you know something and you let it go longer, you no longer can control the narrative.
Yeah.
At that point. And then it always seems like a little worse.
Yeah.
Right. Almost like the other person is like, well, why were you hiding that from me? Well,
right. How long have you known? It's like
I
5 years.
wasn't really hiding it from you, but I just, I didn't feel like the timing was right. You know?
Well, and I've seen clients do that, and I was sort of guilty of this. And so in my earlier relationship was, what will my parents think? It's like, my dad just paid, however much money for this huge wedding. And 5 days after the wedding, I realized, oh shit, I made a mistake. Who has the guts at that age? I was in my early 20s. Who has the guts at that age to go to your parents and go, oh, hey, whoops, do over. I kind of fucked that one up. I stayed in that relationship a lot longer than I should have. my most current marriage, I mean, I knew 10 years ago it was on the outs. So yeah. We all learn and grow. We get better.
Well, and I think too, the tie around to the wrap into the kids, right? Yeah. I think a lot of times maybe we withhold because we think they can't handle it, right? Or we want to protect them.
Yep.
Or again, what's everybody going to think, right? Those are probably some of the main reasons why we do these things. But the kids can handle it.
Yep.
Adults can handle it too, right? And I think a lot of times, like we're talking about, it's better to just rip the Band-Aid off, than it is to let it kind of go on, longer and longer and longer, and draw things out and make them more painful, and then, have this whole maybe feeling of deceit from the other person, like that of, well, why didn't you tell me before?
Right.
And so.
Well, and you just said something very important, which is they can handle it. The kid can handle it. The person can handle it. But here's the thing, even if they can't handle it, how are they going to learn to handle it unless people give them things to handle? Right? How are they going to learn to manage that kind of news or manage that kind of situation if they're never given the opportunity to do it? So I think it's important to be honest with those things. Well,
and it's not really your responsibility for how they choose to react. Right.
Totally.
But it's in effect, it's kind of giving people a gift, just like you talked about with the dating, right? You were giving those guys a gift by not stringing them on, letting them know, it ain't going to happen. Right. And I remember, again, when I was dating it was it was one of those where we were sitting in this restaurant, nice lady, having a good time, but I kind of looked at her, I'm like, this isn't going anywhere, is it? And she's like, nope. I'm like, that's what I was thinking too, but hey, it's been nice, kind of a thing.
It's hilarious.
And
what would you have done if she was like, yeah, I love you, and you're like, oh,
I don't know. It didn't happen that way, but
Right.
it was just kind of funny. I mean, that kind of popped into my head again. I still remember it was this Cuban cafe in Orange, California. We were sitting there, and it was kind of like, yeah, I don't think this is going anywhere, is it? She's like, nope.
And you probably wouldn't have picked up on that if it was going someplace. I mean, you could tell. You're not.
Yeah, we both kind of knew. I mean, she was, but yeah, for whatever reason, there wasn't that chemistry, click. Where other times it's like you can't wait to get out of the restaurant, right? Because there's something different going on there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
you mean like sex?
I don't know. Are we allowed to talk about sex on here?
I think we have done. If it's on, I think we've covered sex.
I think we have covered that.
Yeah. Cool. So on that note, be as open and honest as you can, and don't underestimate the ability of people to handle the things that you're going to tell them. And again, if they can't handle it, they will, manage it in the way they do. And this is how we learn and grow and learn to manage harder conversations. So
yeah, and the quicker, again, if you've got kids, same thing. Don't try to necessarily protect them. Let them learn some of these lessons early on. Because like I said, I mean, I look at some people now that are, late 20s, early 30s, and I think, my God, I had 4 kids. I was on my 3rd or 4th house that I'd bought. I was an executive in a corporation, and it's like, and you can't even blow your nose,
right?
Sort
without
of
calling mom to help you.
Without, yeah, and it's like let's give people that gift of being able to, choose and decide what they're going to do, and not try to shelter them.
Yeah, 100% agree. All right, well, that's a fun one. Okay. I am Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode. See ya.
See ya.